Everybody's quite happy?
Yep.
Yeah. It makes some sense, you think?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So, in that case, Pratandar, you can share your screen.
Fantastic. Could you give access to PDD, no microphone?
I've just given you can, anybody can share now, including yourself.
Oh, is it? Okay, in that case. Just 1 second. Hare Krishna. Lovely.
We can see your screen.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay. Hare Krishna. First of all,
Hare
I'll my humble obeisances onto Sri Krishna Das Swami Guru Maharaj and also Srila Prabhupada and all you devotees as well for being here. So together we can learn about the Bhagavad Gita. My approach to the Bhagavad Gita is slightly different to probably not everyone else. I'll just explain a little bit about myself. I went to university, studied control engineering, which was software, electronics, hardware, control systems. And when I went out into industry, I basically was a programmer, you know, and I saw a lot of the way we used to design software was by, you know, getting a set of requirements, writing a specification, prototyping, and then eventually developing a product, and then naturally testing. And also, this is when product development, but when it came to process improvement, you know, similar processes were followed by business. You know, for example, there'd be a problem, so they'll define the problem, review it, investigate it, verify all the constraints, and then execute a procedure to correct the problem or the blockage or whatever the issue was. And I, whenever I read the Bhagavad Gita, I always got interested because I always saw chapter 1 as the problem. You know, we've got a problem here with Arjun. It's on many layers. It's on an intellectual layer, it's on a mind layer, it's on a body layer, and it's also on the layer of relationships with external objects, namely people. And so I started to analyze the Bhagavad Gita, and I like to share what I found. In chapter 1.
Oh, just Pitamba.
Hanji.
So this is on, it's not a PowerPoint presentation, right?
This is in my Visio program, but I can create images of all this if you like.
No. I just, because we normally do it PowerPoint presentation. It doesn't have to be, but with the PowerPoint presentation, you can then enlarge it to the whole screen. This sort of gives us about 75% of the screen. Is that what your intention is?
Look, going forward, I'll probably create images and create it into a PDF file. How about that?
But no, it's fine. You just do what you're comfortable with. But this is fine. We can see it absolutely fine.
Brilliant, brilliant. I mean, the other reason is I've got a lot more. I can do a lot more things, and you know, fiddly diddly things on the screen. So
okay, that's good.
The Bhagavad Gita starts with a question where Dhritarashtra is asking what happened on the battlefield. And to be honest, every day in life, you know, we're constantly going through the battlefield of life with relationships, business, work, health, etc. And the problem Arjun had was, you know, his qualities as a devotee and as a spiritual personality and with someone who's got a very close relationship with Krishna was at the battlefield, you know, something went wrong, you know, and he's a Khatri. He's fought many fights in the past. He's actually fought Bhishma, Dronachar already and beaten them. But unfortunately, in this scenario, because it was now to the death, you know, an issue happened. A very interesting point is when his mind observed the battlefield and he saw all his relatives, his intellect could not cope with the amount of information that was going in. And at that time, that's where the collapse happened, because there wasn't a marriage of the mind and the intellect, and the intellect was just misfiring. And you can see this misfiring from the questions and the behavior and the body, the effects that he has on the body. So let's investigate, you know, what happened. At intellectual level, Arjun got confused about his duty.
Mm-hmm.
And then at a mind level, he said, I'm forgetting myself and my mind is reeling. And this is really interesting because what's happening here, all the sensory information that is going into his mind, he just can't cope. And on top of that, he's admitted, due to weakness of the heart, due to weakness of my heart. This has also had an effect on his body now. And the interesting thing here is also that whenever you will experience in life a tragic moment, someone passing away, a car accident or something, some of these sensations you're going to experience as well, such as the limbs quivering, the mouth drying up, body trembling, hands standing on end, and what you were doing, you'll drop. You know, that's like the Gandhi falling, skin burning, etc. Another thing was, what was the actual problem? You know, when we look at Arjun, the actual problem came out of his compassion. He was very, very worried about the sinful reactions, the destruction of family traditions, and also indecision. Once again, the intellect was not working as it should. And this goes down to the nature of Arjun, with his characteristics, which is he's got a soft heart. He wasn't really interested in, you know, the heavenly kingdom. He was ready to forgive the aggressors and evildoers, and even be ready to be killed. Arjun also, after everything had collapsed within himself, he started bringing positive arguments, which, yes, these are positive arguments which Arjun is bringing forward. For example, when societies collapse and there are wars, it brings destruction. Family traditions stop, irreligion, women become polluted. There's loads and loads of children born who are not taken care of, hellish life, and culture is destroyed. We can actually see this with the examples within our own history, human history, 20, 30 years, if we look very carefully at what happened. When the Gulf War with Saddam Hussein started, you know, so many buildings were destroyed, so many infrastructure were destroyed, so many families were wrecked. And the same story has happened in Vietnam. And you know, it's amazing how quick, this is one thing that really gets to me, you know, it's really interesting how quick the politicians will run into the war with no real concern for the consequences, because, you know, the consequences are far away. Only a couple of days ago, people have been remembering Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And it's quite incredible that people who actually who want war are so quick to drop a bomb on a city where not only human beings are killed, but all the animals and all the other living entities that are there. And I've also put down some society issues, you know, like you know, with wars and everything, you know, and when families collapse, what happens? You know, there's like abortions, and, you know, the number of divorces. That's another thing that can affect society. And so cutting a long story short, so we've identified there's been a problem, and Arjun is discussing the problem. We've also understood that there are issues with, you know, just running into war. Now what we need to understand is, how are we going to get out of this problem, or how is Arjun going to get out of this problem, and how can we relate the Bhagavad Gita to our lives? Before we move on into the discussions of Krishna and what his answers are, we have to decide, you know, what side are we on? are we going to live for Dharma, and are we going to be ready to die for Dharma? Which society which part of the army do we want to be in? Do we want to be with the Pandavas or the Kauravas? And if we want to be with the Pandavas, we're going to have to take up some of the qualities that the Pandavas already have. Or we can do nothing and just carry on as per normal, as they say. The decision is totally in our own hand. Chapter 2 is where Krishna starts off giving the answers. Before he does, Krishna kind of gives Arjun a little bit of a telling off, a little bit of a chastisement, saying, you know, how have you got to this stage? You know, I thought much more of you. You know, you were capable for much more. This weakness, this pettiness, you know, you are excluding yourself from the higher planets and even the kingdom. Arjun reacts and he starts giving his answers, you know, such as, you know, I don't wish to kill my elders who are worthy of worship. It talks about renunciation, etc. And you can see that there's still a lot of confusion. And the lovely thing about Arjun is he actually accepts it. He actually accepts that he's confused and he's in a bit of trouble. And to be honest, this is the best kind of disciple. If a disciple's got an issue and he meets his Guru Maharaj, I've got this problem. Many times with Krishna Das Swami, I had these kind of issues as well. I would go, Guru Maharaj, I've got this problem. And for Guru Maharaj, you know, or the spiritual master, the problem is really nothing. It's just merely the student going through the modes of material nature, his desires and other ambitions he may have. So he talks about, I'm confused about my duty. I've lost composure due to weakness. And this is absolutely incredible when Arjun says that, because I can remember when I went to Guru Maharaj and I said something, Guru Maharaj actually said to me, Beta, this is weakness, you know, and straight to the point. And then comes the surrender, the renunciation. Now I am a disciple who is surrendered unto you. Please advise what's best for me and please instruct me. And I just don't know how I'm going to get out of this problem. You know, there's no way, there's no means to drive away my grief, which is now a mental problem, and it's drying up my senses, which is a physical body problem. So, you know, we should always remember we've got three instruments, namely the mind, the body, and intellect, which work together, and namely, which is what we experience as life. So whenever anything bad happens or anything good, it's always these three that will be where we will be the experiencer of whatever we want to experience. So then Krishna gives his answers and replies back to Arjun. And what I did was I analyzed the text and I tried to group things together and see, okay, is there a relationship? What I found was very interesting. Krishna talks a lot about the seer, the bhagat, the devotee, the man of knowledge, the man of wisdom. And under that flag, or under that, you know, barrier, there are so many things like action, duty. You know, what is the mind? What is his mind like? What is his knowledge like? What is the intellect like? Bhakti yoga and also sannyasa yoga. Krishna also moves away in a little bit onto the mind, a little bit onto the senses and the body, talks a lot about the soul and also the characteristics of an unwise man. The circles are kind of the amount of information that was given, represent the amount of information given on each topic. I've tried to, you know, give a size to it. Before we move in, so the next stage, so the general stuff, Krishna starts off and he goes through the conversation. As I said, I was going to group them all together. So from this diagram, what we can see is Krishna talks about the seer, the body, and the soul. You know, and you can see the characteristics of the seer. You know, he doesn't think that when somebody is slain, he doesn't think he's slain, and he doesn't kill anyone or cause anyone to kill. Then there's a little bit about the body, not as much, just very quick and brief. Look, the body is not eternal. It's temporary. It's sure to come to an end. It was manifest in the beginning, manifest in the interim, and unmanifest at the end when annihilated. So knowing this, you should not grieve for the body. And it's very interesting, you know, Krishna doesn't talk a lot about the body, but when it comes to the soul, suddenly Krishna's just coming out like, you know, bullets blazing, saying, look, the soul is always existence. It passes through bodies. A sober person is not bewildered. You know, it's indestructible, it's immeasurable, it's imperishable, it's eternal. It's neither born nor dies. And it's primeval, it's ancient, it's immutable, not burnt by the fire, not moistened by the wind, and sort of by the water, and not withered by the wind, does not get burned, dry, everlasting, present everywhere. And then, this is absolutely brilliant, because what it does, it just whacks in a load of knowledge. You know, look, these are the facts. Before we just move on with the Bhagavad Gita, I just want to let you guys know something. When I was working in business, I had a fantastic manager who people used to come up to him as an IT manager and say, this is the problem and this is the problem. And he used to say to me, Pratinder, when they come through the door, never trust what they say, you know, until you've got the facts, you know. So that was a saying I always remembered, trust no one until you've got the facts. So what's happening here is Krishna is giving the facts. So then what's happening is your trust is increasing. And the more times this happens, the more times somebody comes up to you and gives you advice to rely on and is accurate, the more your confidence in that individual grows. And also you'll start taking that information automatically as gospel. The other thing I found very interesting was, although Krishna is talking about the seer, the body, the soul, and also action, which we're going to go on to next, Krishna keeps hinting, look, just do your duty. And when I read the Bhagavad Gita linearly, I did not see how many times Krishna had kind of hinted this. For example, he goes, look, just do your duty as a Khatri, opening the doors for the heavenly planets. Look, either you're going to be killed on the battlefield or attain the heavenly planets. Once again, do your duty. Conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Once again, do your duty. Fight for the sake of your duty. So it's interesting that Krishna is, you know, whacking in, putting in a lot of, look, do your duty, do your duty. Then he also talks about, before we go into talking what duty for a devotee or a spiritualist should be, I'd like to show you, you know, what I found, what Krishna found about, was discussing about unwise men, you know. So with unwise men, you know, basically when it comes to action and duty, they're constantly neglecting it and they're not performing. They've got their own little ambitions and dreams, where either it's womanizing, drinking alcohol, eating meat, gambling, other entertainments, watching videos, playing computer games for 12 hours a day or whatever, you know. And because of this kind of attitude, right, they naturally start performing abominable actions, you know, and murder, violence, aggression. And so, okay, let's go deeper now. Okay, then what is the actual, you know, unwise man, you know, into? When I analyzed the Bhagavad Gita, I found that he's very attached to sense enjoyment, and is bewildered by material nature because he's got no spiritual understanding. He's also attached to elevation to higher planets, more money, more power, more sense gratification, more desire for opulent life. Also, you know, my reputation, my family, you know, that's very important to me. Although in the eyes of a spiritualist, he has none. He has no control over his senses, which is very dangerous because later on we will see what damage that can cause on the mind and the intellect. Partially, we've already seen this with Arjun, you know, that when you're not fixed, you can really get messed up in your head. And the other thing about the unwise man is he's always interested in his fruit of action. You know, I want my results, I want my results. And the other thing Krishna also puts in is that his intelligence is many branched. He can't stick to a single point. And then because of all the above, Krishna says these people are miserable, they're misers. And because they're misers, they are dishonorable. As discussed, they are already, neglecting their actions, and actually they have no determination for devotional service because their attention is somewhere else. Guru Maharaj used to say many times in his lectures, if your dhyan is in, your relatives, your money, and this, that, and the other, how can devotional service ever go in? Devotional service is you have to start excluding a lot of negative activity at the layer of the mind, the body, and the intellect. Okay, now we will move over to the seer, because Krishna starts this, what Krishna really goes for it here. And to be honest, when I drew this diagram out, I was absolutely amazed. More and more and more just came out. The seer never considers he's the cause of his fruitive actions, and he has no right to the fruits of actions either. However, the beautiful thing about what he does have, he has the right to perform actions. And the other thing about the spiritualist is he's constantly attached to performing them. Devotees are constantly attached to chanting the holy name of the Lord, reciting the Bhagavad Gita, chanting, eating prasad, being associated with devotees, and even being in talks like this that we're all involved in together, because they want to learn more. Now, this is what I found really interesting, because we already spoke about what the miserable, the misers were doing and what they were into. Here we can see what Krishna really goes for when he talks about, when it comes to action and duty, what the seer does. He always acts in knowledge. And because he's acting in knowledge and working on that knowledge, his intellect is increasing. Because his intellect is increasing, he's no longer performing bad actions, and he's performing positive actions, spiritual actions. He's getting free from the bondage of karma, which, because his buddhi is also increasing, which is his intelligence, right? There's no negative result. His fear goes away. Of course it's going to go away, because he's not doing anything negative. He's constantly, worked in positive spirituality. And because he's working with his intellect in such a way, something else is happening. As his buddhi is increasing, his mind is becoming in equilibrium, and as a result, he's becoming less and less influenced by happiness, distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat. Once again, these are at the mind, the body, and the intellectual layers, which we were talking about, the instruments. And hence, because he's in equilibrium, because his buddhi has increased, he never incurs sin. And that's like a jackpot. That's like, ding, yeah, we've made it. Because if you're not sinning, because abominable actions are such a massive, counter. It's like, it's not even worth going there. It's like it poisons the milk, He's also free from dualities. He's transcendental to duality. He has no concern for dualities. He's constantly established in the self. Wakes up in the morning, does his rounds. He does his arti. And when his intellect is in this state and he's abandoned attachment for success and failure, he's now in equanimity. It's called yoga. He's now reached because his body is purified, is every evenness of mind. His intellect and his mind have become steady. Because of this, he is now ready to cross across the delusion, which we will see later, how it affects, how delusion, that one word, has such a massive effect on your actions if your buddhi is not, purified. And that's why Prabhupada really connects buddhi with bhakti yoga, and that they kind of intermingle quite a lot. And the other thing, because his intellect is so solid, his path is resolute, and he's no longer disturbed, unshaken, in self, and all he wants to do is attain self-realization. That's his main target in his life. The other thing he does through his actions, he works for Krishna. He works for the Supreme Lord. Because why? He wants to attain the Lord. He wants to fully surrender to the Lord. So constantly through his actions, he is surrendering. He's engaged in devotional service. He gets rid of his good and bad actions and reactions, and he's freed from the result of work. As we've already discussed, as soon as you surrender unto the Lord takes up your, you know, your karma and your future. And he also becomes free from death. So it just shows how devotional service, how being acting in Krishna consciousness, your actions, your knowledge, your intellect, and at the physical layer, remaining far distant from abominable actions and fruitive actions, not paying an interest in, just absorbed in the devotional service of the Lord, you can attain the Supreme Lord. Krishna then goes on to explain, hey, you know, what a seer, a mind, a spiritualist, a bhagat, what is his actual, his mind like? What is his state like? So let's have a look at this diagram and see what we find. What we find is that, first of all, because his intellect has been so purified and his actions have been so pure, his mind gets purified. Brilliant. That's number one problem. Your mind, you know, the mind is the main issue here. Once the mind is controlled, it becomes free from attachment and aversion. It's not elated when you're happy. Basically, he's becoming in an equilibrium. His ego is not dancing around to all the nice stuff and all the bad stuff, and hence he's not disturbed by the threefold material nature. Look at that. He's not afraid. Sorry, he's not disturbed by the threefold material nature. That's what causes you the fear. You know, all this positive, all this, you know, attachment, and that's what frees you from fear, and it frees you from anger. Thus, when the mind is thus purified, you can attain that transcendental consciousness where the mind is totally purified, and that leads on to, you know, naturally one being satisfied in the self, which further helps you attain transcendental consciousness. And this all happens because he gives up his desires for sense gratifications, which once again, transcendental consciousness. So all this, you know, not being disturbed by material nature, transcendental consciousness. Not being elated when happy, transcendental consciousness. Being free from attachment, transcendental consciousness. Being free from fear and anger, transcendental consciousness. So if you want transcendental consciousness, we can see from just karma, you know, and how you use your mind, you can really move into transcendental consciousness. Then Krishna goes on and explains, you know, what is, you know, the seer's perfection of knowledge. What we find here is that a seer, one who is not attached, right, without attachment, when he does not rejoice on obtaining something good and laments on obtaining something bad, the divine wisdom comes in. Once again, that goes back to transcendental consciousness. So, you know, transcendental consciousness and perfect knowledge and perfect wisdom, you know, are very much bordering on the same kind of area. And the other thing is the seer works very hard to withdraw and subdue the senses from the objects, because he's not interested in sense enjoyment, even though the taste remains, because naturally the senses are attracted to, the tongue is attracted to food, etc. But if he executes all these and directs them towards Krishna, you know, that's surrender. That's what is surrender, when you start pushing everything towards Krishna. The other thing is, because the seer is working very hard to control the senses and the mind, right? He subdues the mind and he subdues the senses. And then what happens when these two are subdued? The intellect just ramps up, which is closest to the Atma. And because now these are subdued, it is so easy to be concentrating on the Supreme Brahm, the Supreme Paramatma, and that would naturally take you down the path of perfect knowledge and wisdom. However, if the seer allows the mind to be waved by its nature, which is strong and turbulent, he's going to be carried away, and it's going to wreak havoc, and it's going to mess up his discrimination and self-control. And that's why the seer never stops practicing self-control and discrimination, because it helps him to absorb in the supreme consciousness by controlling the senses and the mind. Krishna then moves on to Bhakti Yoga, And once again, there's like an overlap between actions and bhakti, you know, because obviously to do bhakti yoga, you've got to do actions. And here what we see as we go through the Bhagavad Gita is the seer has subdued the senses. And because he subdued the senses, he's now absorbed in Shri Krishna, Mat Papa. And naturally, he's attained perfect knowledge, divine wisdom, and perfect intelligence. But we got to be careful. You know, we really got to know what our pitfalls are and where we can actually fall. And so Krishna goes back, in one sense, although explaining Bhakti Yoga, you know, how an unwise man can get totally affected and messed up, and how your bhakti can get messed up, how your mind, your intellect, you know, can get messed up. And here's the diagram that I found. Before I explain the diagram, I don't know if you've ever experienced, if you're in a temple, somebody does something to the microphone and suddenly the speakers go really loud and there's a massive sound and it hurts everybody's ears. That happens because of a positive feedback loop. The microphone is amplifying the signal, which is going into the speaker, and that speaker is going louder, which is going back into the microphone. And as a result, you get a massive, you know, loop, feedback loop, and the sound goes, and you hear a screeching sound. That same screeching sound, you're going to see an unwise man due to his lusty desires and the way he behaves in society and the way he uses his mind and intellect. So let's see what's happening in this diagram. You have an unwise man, which we've already discussed. He's into fruitive actions, he loves performing abominable actions, etc. His minds are constantly contemplating the objects. What this means is, you know, he's constantly thinking about it. He's thinking about the car. He's thinking about, you know, oh, I want to go clubbing, or I want to go drinking, and all this kind of stuff, you know. Then naturally, what happens? Attachment. The mind kind of gets, it's as if the mind gets addicted. You know, it's like it's, the more you do something, the more habitual it becomes. Once that attachment becomes like a fever in the mind, you know, like a splinter, and he wants that particular object to enjoy, it increases his desire. And that desire leads to anger. It only leads to anger is when he can't get the desire, you know. So, you know, the aggression, you can just see the aggression is now slowly moving in. As now attachment, desire, and anger have kicked in, this leads to the intellect getting delusional, very similar to the delusion that Arjun was fearing. Remember, I spoke about how the mind can pass too much information to the intellect, and the intellect starts misfiring. That misfiring is known as delusional. You know, it's just going chaos. Oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Oh Christ. Oh, Krishna. I don't know. You know, that leads to bewilderment of memory. Oh, what was I just saying? What am I thinking? What am I doing? For heaven's sake, your mind going in 100 directions and you're not even thinking straight. That further leads to intelligence lost, and hence you fall back into the material pool. Another thing, sadly, what happens is when the mind and the intelligence start, you know, fighting against each other, you can see it in the, you know, one falls down, but the intelligence also becomes the driving force to further attachment and further lusty desires, further anger, further greed, for contemplation of the objects. And so what you have here is a positive feedback loop. And because the intellect cannot act as a negative feedback force, or as to, you know, counter, the intellect just goes down, and people say, oh, you don't have any common sense, you're an idiot, you know. And these are the kind of terms people would use: rascal, you know, you're a murderer, because you've allowed yourself to fall into those categories. However, the news is not all bad, because what it is, although there's a positive sign here, I could very easily include another diagram and wrap it around this one and include all the stuff you can do which can counteract all that attachment, desire, anger, greed, and that is everything what Krishna has suggested in the action, you know, in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, as we had discussed. Overview, in the overview section here: action, steady state of mind, perfect knowledge, bhakti, yoga, and sannyas. I've only managed to get up to this stage in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 2. Hopefully I'll get to the later verses later on. The analysis just takes a bit more longer, especially when you're trying to analyze the relationship between things. So I apologize, I haven't managed to finish it. But one thing I would like to end on is the very last verse, where Krishna says that even if one remembers at the hour of death, you know, you can be freed from the cycle of birth and death and reach the supreme abode. How? By following the principles that Krishna has outlined, by your actions, your state of steady mind, bhakti yoga, perfect renunciation, sannyas, and perfect knowledge. And one thing I noticed was, as soon as you've got to the stage of bhakti yoga, sannyasa yoga comes running towards you with arms full open. So in my opinion, you can't really get to sannyas yoga. It's all kind of false by trying to jump straight to sannyas, trying to renounce life. Just so religion was, oh, I'm going to leave the battlefield. No, it's not going to happen that way. You're going to have to go through the process of acquiring knowledge, performing good actions, your intellect and your mind getting purified, and then bhakti yoga will kick in. And the beautiful thing about bhakti yoga is it's higher than all the other yogas, and it naturally takes you on to you know, wonderful and higher, more spiritual things. For example, Krishna. Hare Krishna, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope, you know, it was these diagrams weren't over, you know, too confusing. Jai Shri Radha Krishna Chandra Bhagwan.
Hare Krishna. Pitambar Prabhu ki jai. Good effort. You've obviously put a lot of work into it, and it is somewhat intense. But I like the way you've brought in, like especially that. Go back to that soul one, the soul in the body, where Krishna talks about the soul so many times compared to the body. Yeah, that one. That's very interesting, because you've sort of put it together nicely there, and it just shows you how much Krishna talks about the soul compared to the body. So that's good. It was good. Nice analysis. It's a lot to take in, but I think it's good for you, definitely, because you will, as putting it together, you will understand a lot. And what you were speaking, your preaching seemed to be spot on. So I think it's good. And you'll refine it better when you get feedback from people when you present it to them, in terms of how complex it sounds, it seems. But it's a good start. Thank you for your hard work. Anybody like to ask any questions, perhaps, or make any comments to Pitamba? It's important to give feedback, because then that'll help Pitanda as well. Okay. We can go to Karuna, Chitra.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Chitra. I know it's really late there, so thank you for staying up and being part of this. Very important, very nice of you.
I'm very happy too.
So, would you like to? You're going to summarize chapter 3.
Yes.
Okay. Do you need the screen by any chance?
No.
Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. Don't need to. Don't need to. Oh, there's a very nice comment by Sanjana's mother, Henna. Well done. Agreed, a lot to take in, especially when you're a beginner. I liked the slides, but could be more simplified to the beginner to get their attentive listening. I think that's good feedback, Pritamba. I think for you, that exercise is brilliant because it puts everything together and you can, from a preaching point of view, really give good analysis. But perhaps to the observer, you may need to make it a little bit more simpler. Anyway, we can talk about it.
Thank you. That's really good feedback. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, sorry, Chitra.
Chapter 3 is based on Karma Yoga, the technique of achieving spiritual connection with God through our daily activities. While performing our prescribed duties, one should aim to please the Lord without selfish motives. These activities we carry out can either bind us to this world or liberate us from it, depending on whether it is classified as karma kand or karma yoga. Moreover, someone can still live on in this world after having been liberated and will be able to set an example for others. If one practices karma yoga, one will climb the yoga ladder, which starts at material enjoyment to spirituality, going through Sakam Karma Yoga to reach Nishkam Karma Yoga. One who reaches this stage will have attained peace and liberation. In light of this, we should offer the food we cook to the Lord and make sure we are not enjoying the food in any way before having done so. We should also aim at cooking the Lord's desired food. Karma Yoga can be summarized as the process by which one gets detached from material entanglement. One should perform all his activities as duty to be accomplished in this world and without attachment to the result of the activities. Lord Krishna explains how great devotees have continued to carry out their duties in this world so that they could set the proper example, like King Janak attained perfection solely by performing his prescribed duties. In text 22 of chapter 3, Lord Krishna says that even he is engaged in prescribed duties, but does not need nor want anything. So Bhakti Yoga will free us from the entanglement of this world. That is, chanting the Mahamantra and reading holy scriptures such as Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Krishna further explains that it is lust, born of contact with material mode of passion, which is the sinful enemy of the living entity. Lust exists in the senses, the mind, and the intelligence, and thus covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. Lord Krishna therefore explains that one has to first control their senses and mind through chanting and hearing his name to be able to properly practice Karma Yoga. And that's the end of chapter 3.
Thank you. Very good. So you read it nicely, and I liked your analysis of Kama Yoga about Nishkam Kama Yoga and Sakam Kama Yoga. So is Kama Yoga enough, do you think, to take one to Krishna?
No, one should aim for bhakti yoga while practicing karma yoga to attain Krishna.
And how does one do that? Like, how can you raise yourself to the platform of Bhakti Yoga?
The 4 regulative principles.
Yeah. Anything else?
Chanting
Yeah.
and the name of the Lord will help us sharpen the intelligence and control the senses, control the mind, so that we are able to attain bhakti yoga.
Yeah, that's good. Because Karma Yoga, you may not be attached to the result, but neither are you attached to Krishna. So as soon as you start chanting, as you said, following the rules, you become a little bit more closer to Krishna. That becomes Bhakti Yoga. That's very good. Good. Yeah, well done, Chitra.
Thank you, Prabhu.
It's okay. So I'm going to call, I think Partha is going to do 4 and 5. Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, chapter 4 starts with Krishna explaining to Arjun that he instructed this the science of yoga to the sun god Vivaswan, who then instructed it to Manu, who instructed it to Ikshvaku. So then, through this chain of dislipic succession, all the saintly kings understood it. But over the course of time, this chain was broken, and the science appeared to be lost. So the question by Arjun is, if the sun god Vivaswan is older than you, how did you instruct the science to him? So then Krishna says, explains that many births have passed for you and I, but only I can remember them, you cannot. So he says that he is unborn, his transcendental body never deteriorates, and although he is the Lord of all living entities, he still appears every millennium in his original transcendental form. And he says the famous verse, Yada Hidamrasya. Wherever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharat, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. So then his purpose is to deliver the pious and annihilate the miscreants, and then re-establish the principles of religion. So he goes on to explain that one who knows the transcendental nature of his appearance and activities doesn't take birth again upon leaving the body, but however attains his eternal abode. So even just knowing his transcendental nature of his appearance and activities. So then he says, being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in him, taking refuge in him, many persons in the past have become purified by this, and thus they've attained transcendental love for him. And as all surrender unto him, he rewards them accordingly. So he says that everyone follows his path in all respects. And then he goes on to explain that even though he created all of these, three modes of material nature, all the work that's associated with them, the four divisions of society, although he's the creator of that system, it's understood that he's unchanged by them. He's not affected by them, nor does he aspire for any fruits of action. And then one who knows this truth, one who understands this truth about him, does not become entangled in the fruit of reactions of work. And then he goes on to explain what action is, what inaction is. He says he will explain what action is later on. And he says the intricacies of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should know properly what action is, what forbidden action is, and what inaction is. And then he goes on to say that one who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent. So action and inaction is inaction and action. Inaction in action is basically action without. So Krishna goes on to explain it's action without attachment to the results, or desires, or actions without the desire for material things. For example, devotional service, pure devotional service, without any tinge of material hankering. And then action and inaction is when one tries to do nothing, but his thoughts are still, his thoughts and desires are still there for material things. So even though he tries to do nothing, his desires and his mind will lead him astray, and he'll still gain some reactions. Even though and
I think he also, if he's meant to act, but he doesn't act, like a policeman who's supposed to stop a robber, but he decides not to stop him, that inaction will bring a reaction because he'll get sacked because he's not doing his duty. Yeah.
And then he says, so such a man who has no attachment, who abandons attachment for the results of his activities, who's ever satisfied and independent, so he gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions and only acts for the bare necessities of life. So then, even though he is working and engaged in all kinds of undertakings, he's not affected by the sinful reactions or pious reactions even. And he is free from duality, does not envy, is steady in both success and failure, and is never entangled. And then he says, the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all sacrifices of work culminate in transcendental knowledge. Then verse 34 is just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. And then at the end of the chapter he says, that's armed with the it says the doubts in your heart which has been born out of ignorance should be slashed with the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, stand and fight. And then chapter 5 is karma yoga, action and Krishna consciousness. So Arjuna begins by asking Krishna, first you ask me to renounce work, and then you recommend work with devotion, so tell me which is more beneficial. And Krishna goes on to say that although they're both good for liberation, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work. He says that merely renouncing all activities yet not engaging in devotional service of the Lord cannot make one happy. But a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme without delay. And yeah, so that is one who works in devotion, is a pure soul, controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. And then, though always working, such a man is never entangled. So he performs akarma. And when one's intelligence, mind, faith, and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one is fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge, and then proceeds straight on the path of liberation. And the humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. So these people whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless, like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. And one whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. Those who are beyond the dualities are always busy working for the welfare of all people, all living entities, and they achieve liberation as well. And also, these people are free from anger, all material desires. They are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, and they are assured of liberation in the very near future. And that ends the 5th chapter.
What's the difference between the 5th chapter, Karma Yoga, Action in KC, and the 3rd chapter, which is just Karma Yoga? Do you know what the difference is?
This is mainly about akarma and performing work in devotional service, rather than just performing work without
Attachment.
Without any attachment.
Yeah.
Even though that's good, it's not the as Arjun says in the beginning of the 5th chapter, which is more beneficial. And Krishna says, without a doubt, action in devotional service, rather than just renunciation.
Yeah, no, that's good. Anybody got any questions for Partha or even Chitra? It's always good to just ask, because that also shows, it tests the speaker, basically. It's good to test. And I like to Ritesh's comment for Pitamba, which was phenomenal work. Totally agree with that. I think the Western mind is very rational, and this is a fantastic resource to help a rational mind. For example, when presenting to a university. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely needed when you're presenting to students. So that's like the first 5 chapters. And next we wanted to call upon Sanjana. You're doing from 5 to 12, is that right, Sanjana?
6 to 12, I think.
Oh, 6. Yeah, sorry, 6 to 12. Oh, well done. Good. And I think maybe some more people will join. Why don't we just have a quick... Now, Karuna, I would understand if you had to go, because it's 12:30.
Yes. But I want to listen to Sanjana before going.
She's poetry in
She speaks
motion.
so well.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored that you're staying up.
Yeah, I
You better be.
Chitra is leaving, but I am staying.
Oh, Krishna. Yeah, no, thank you. And the celebrations were good, huh? In Krishna Balaram temple.
Oh yes, oh yes. We had some 500 devotees, I think.
Wow. This is for who's Vyas Puja?
Gopal Krishna Maharaj.
Gopal Krishna.
Gopal Krishna Maharaj.
That's amazing. 500 people. Oof.
Yeah,
Wow.
they took at least 2 hours to serve prasadam to all of us.
Wow.
And
Hare
just
Krishna.
imagine it was Ekadashi, but we had such a sumptuous prasad.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
Very good. Very good. Okay, so Sanjana, you take it away.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. This is the first time I've done this. So. Right. Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare
Thank you
Krishna.
very much for coming to see this presentation. And I'll be talking through the Bhagavad Gita, chapters 6 to 12. So this section is entitled Bhakti Yoga, and so it kind of takes from the themes that we've been listening to previously, sort of doing actions and devotional service and elaborating a little bit more on that, and also Krishna's nature and where he can be found. And this knowledge is really helpful for us in terms of just strengthening our devotion, our understanding and our love for Krishna, and accepting him sort of as the supreme personality of Godhead, and how to direct our worship in that way through this knowledge. So Krishna begins the chapter, the section with chapter 6, and he's outlining Dhyana Yoga, or the sort of system of Ashtanga Yoga, which is a very, very difficult system. He basically does this to remind us all that in Kali Yuga, this is a very, very difficult system to take up, and often it's not in our nature. An example of this, for example, is Arjun. Arjun is bewildered by this process of Ashtanga Yoga because he himself is a Kshatriya. He knows how to fight. He doesn't know necessarily how not to act and go and renounce himself, even though that's something that he asks to do at the beginning. Because this is some of the principles of Ashtanga Yoga that are outlined, some of the things that you'd have to do if you took up this practice, which includes living in seclusion. You'd have to be celibate. You'd have to be sitting perfectly straight nearly for most of the day and focusing your consciousness on the Supreme, meditating for many years, being completely silent, living under strict regulations for eating and sleeping, which is very difficult, but also something that we can take in our lives. This is something that we can take in our principles. For example, today is Ekadashi. That's one of the ways that we've been able to regulate our eating today, just in our daily lives. And perhaps doing breathing exercises as well. But as we can see, you know, especially in this day and age, everyone's rushing to work, everybody's rushing to do different things, even though we've slowed down during the pandemic. Ultimately, this society is a very busy one, and so living in seclusion or practicing celibacy and things like that is not very practical for the majority of the population. And Arjuna sort of says this, and he also highlights his concerns about the mind. He says, you know, us mere humans, we're always thinking about this and that, our thoughts are always scattered. Arjuna says, in my view, I think it would be easier to control the wind than to control my mind at this point. And Krishna is very understanding of that. He answers very sympathetically, and he says, you know, it is very difficult. I'm not going to deny this to you. Your mind can either be your enemy or your friend. But with a lot of practice, it can become your friend, and you can harness that control of the mind to serve Krishna and to become close to God. And that's the ultimate sort of goal of any yoga. You know, if you can sit straight for ages, but you don't focus on the Supreme, you're not achieving anything. But if you're able to harness that control, even in this age of Kali Yuga through chanting, for example, it's much more beneficial for you, and you're attaining that ultimate aim of yoga. And finally, because a number of these things are very, very difficult and very perhaps bewildering to us if we're a beginner, Arjuna sort of seeks to reassure us by inquiring what happens to the unsuccessful yogi. He says, you know, if you're taking up the spiritual practice, but for some reason you're distracted, or you fall down again, which is very possible in this era, there's lots of temptations. What will happen? Because you've sort of left the material platform, but you've never really attained the spiritual platform. Are you in a limbo, and are you left? And Krishna says, no, I will never forget someone who genuinely takes up this spiritual process. I will help him in the next birth. I will give him a birth that will help him take it up again. He will be naturally attracted to it, and he will have those resources to continue with that work. And so I think for me, this great lesson was just that we're reminded of how merciful he is, and how this is such a great value for trying out the spiritual process. You never lose anything by experimenting. And even if we might not achieve it in this life, even though that's our ultimate goal, it gives us a ray of hope that we may sometime in the future, and that we accrue everything that we try in this life.
Yeah.
So in chapter 7, Krishna divulges a little bit more about the knowledge of the absolute. And so the first lesson that really gives this to us is that we are able to hear about the Lord and where he can be found. And this is a really, really important process, because we can learn to understand him and learn to see him in our daily life. And that can make it easier for us to focus upon him and devote our life to him and our activities to him. Secondly, he sort of gives a sense, and continuing on this sort of theme, he can give a sense of where he is in the material world. And a very good analogy is sort of like, think of your favorite necklace, perhaps a pearl necklace. There are the pearls, and then there are the threads, and the thread is something that holds everything together. You don't usually see the thread because everybody wants to see the pretty pearls, but ultimately the necklace would be completely broken without the thread. And in a way, the world is like that as well. There are very many beautiful aspects of the world, for example, nature and us, like as the souls, but we're all held together by Krishna's energy and his potency. So then Krishna goes on to outline who approaches him and who does not. Oh, this was actually from the previous point. This was the previous lesson, that how Krishna can be seen in many places in the material world, including our, for example, our taste of water. So he's in everything. And sort of one lesson that we can take from this is that if we're drinking water, which we do a lot, especially when it's very hot in the summer, we can say Rasoham Apsu, which means
very good
of water. Or even if you can't remember that phrase, just say Hare Krishna, or say that in English. Sometimes it may be easier to say in English if you've grown up here. And this is just really helpful to, we can remember how he manifests in our daily life and how we are maintained. And it's very comforting for us, and can fortify our love and devotion.
Very good.
So why do some people believe in God when others deny him? You know, this is a big debate. Does God exist? Everybody talks about this all the time. But Krishna says, I kind of just let everybody do what they want. Everybody comes to the material world thinking they can be the enjoyer, which I think you will learn a little bit more about chapter 13. But so he says, I just let people do what they want, and they can come to me. But there will be certain types of people who naturally won't come to me, and certain types of people who do. So people who reject God tend to be very preoccupied with the material world. So either perhaps they're an illusion because they haven't been educated or given the knowledge, and all they're sort of very foolish. They're not, basically they don't have that consciousness or that knowledge to be developed yet to approach God. Or otherwise they might have a very atheistic nature, perhaps due to past births or things like that, and it will take them a little bit more time to develop that consciousness. And that isn't to say that they won't ever in the future, but perhaps that in this birth it might be impossible or a little bit harder for them. And then there are the 4 types of people who do accept God, though in this sense we all still kind of have a little bit of selfish intent, because we're in the material world and we're fallible beings. So this will be someone who might be seeking wealth. So first they go to God and they say, oh, please give me wealth, please give me wealth. And perhaps then after that they develop an attachment that's free from that selfish intent. And then someone who is distressed, then someone who's inquisitive, thinking there must be more to the world than this. And someone who's sort of seeking the knowledge, the further knowledge that is there. And Krishna asserts the fact that actually it's very, very rare to have someone who will come to earth and just approach God out of complete love and devotion immediately. And this level of purity can take a lot of lifetimes and a lot of bhakti. But eventually, even through these 4 types of people who approach God, we can develop that sort of purity, even if we start out in this motive, this sort of ulterior motive. And then finally, Krishna sort of develops the relationship between the devatas and the Supreme Personality. So So a common misconception, definitely in the West, is that Sanatana Dharma is polytheistic. But actually, this isn't. We do have like sort of one God, but also two forms of that God, which I'll go on to explain. This is Nabi's term. I think he really likes this word. So multi-layered polymorphic bitheism. So what does that mean? That's like the fanciest word you can fit in a conversation. Actually, it's very simple to understand. It's multi-layered because there are different devatas who represent different things. So for example, we can go to Ganesh and ask him to remove obstacles or things like that, but they actually can be worshipped for material gain, but they're sort of like the cabinet ministers, whereas Krishna is like the prime minister. So he's like telling them, okay, I need you to do this, I need you to do that for maintaining the material world. So he's actually the ultimate sort of enjoyer of these worshipping, and it's not really helpful for us because that's ultimately still keeping us on the material platform. It's polymorphic because Krishna, like, he has his first form, which is as Krishna, and then he also has many other expansions. This is known as the Vishnu Tattva. So I've just given a few examples of his expansions here with their photos. So we've got Rama, and many of us will know the Ramayana, so a very popular childhood story. And then also Narimsimha, and then I've got Vishnu here as well. And then finally, bitheism. So while there's like one sort of supreme soul, it can be manifested into two forms, and that's in the divine couple, which is Radha Krishna. At the top here. I don't know if anyone can see it on my screen. I had to move my video.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Ooh. So moving on.
Well done. I'm really impressed by that.
Yeah, I like that word. I like long words. So in chapter 8, this is a really, really important chapter for us because it talks about the time of death. So Arjuna asks about 8 questions, and one of them is what happens at the time of death, which Krishna devotes the most attention to. And it's really important for us because it might seem morbid to say, but when you're born, the ultimate prerequisite of life is that you're going to die. Though the good news is, and we'll learn about this, is that if you're a spiritualist, you really don't need to fear this day of death in the same way that we always do. So Krishna replies that the soul will achieve whatever its consciousness is at the time of death. And he describes, basically, it's really important for us to keep God conscious throughout our life, because at the time of death we want to be remembering Krishna, because otherwise we won't attain him. So that's the reason why we put in all of these principles now, regulating our lives, doing things in devotional service, and ensuring that we're always thinking about serving Krishna, because if we really, really want to do that, and that's throughout our life, we will achieve that at the time of death. So it's a little bit more, elaboration. That a common phrase is that our life flashes before our eyes before we die. So if you're always thinking about Krishna, that's what you're going to see right before you die. And so practical lesson from this, which I got from Nabi's classes, it's just saying God's name, Hare Krishna, out loud every now and then. Say it more and more times as you go on and live your life, and eventually you're going to always be thinking of him, and this will help us remember him at the end in sort of inverted commas, because it's not really the end. You'll ultimately, the soul will live on and in the spiritual abode. And also I think this lesson is so important because going back to chapter 7, it kind of allows us to hear about Krishna and remind us that his energy is always with us. So that's like a very nice thing that we can do to make our life a little bit better. Krishna goes on to explain the possible destinations based on your time of death. Time of death and the possible destinations based on your spiritual path. So basically every spiritual practitioner is going to gain some sort of result from their work and some sort of like reward or somewhere to go. But what this is going to be is depends on their form of yoga or how they practice their Sanatana Dharma. So if you're starting with Karma Kanda, which is kind of when you're aware of religious principles, and you're doing sacrifices, you're doing religious things, but perhaps you're not fully renouncing everything, but you're doing pious activities, you will attain the earth and the heaven. As Chitra was talking about, when you're doing karma yoga, so this is sort of renunciation. So you're not attached to the fruits of your labor, and you're not attached to the material world. So again, you will get a reward for that. You either might progress to a good family to help you further progress in that spiritual path, or you might attain the heavens and reap the benefits of that, those good actions and that renunciation. And then if you're Jnana Yogi, so you're sort of like, you have a little bit more understanding of the self and the fact that you might be eternal. So you have more consciousness of Krishna's eternal part, and therefore you will achieve his Brahman realization and perhaps merge with his energy. And then if Ashtanga Yogi, you could either, depending on what you meditate on, whether it's the sort of effulgence and the eternal aspect of God, so it's the Sat aspect of God, or his knowledge and his consciousness and his material potencies, the localized fact that maintains the material world. But finally, and perhaps what we want to achieve is Bhakti Yoga, which is when we recognize the personal form of the Lord and we worship that, and that way we can go and we can basically enjoy his pastimes with him eternally in Golok Vrindavan or Vaikuntha, depending on our relationship with the Lord. But those are two spiritual realms that once you get there, you're not coming back down, basically. And the yoga ladder kind of elaborates a little bit more on how we can do that. So if we go straight to Bhakti Yoga, we can skip basically all these steps and go straight to Radha Krishna, as you can see in this diagram. So finally, sort of even re-emphasizing the fact that how much Bhakti Yoga can help us out here is that when you've practiced other types of yoga, such as Ashtanga Yoga, it gets really, really complex. So these two verses sort of highlight why it can get complicated at the time of death. First one is that those who know the Supreme Brahman attain that Supreme by passing away from the world during the influence of a fiery god in the light at an auspicious moment of the day, during the fortnight of a waxing moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels to the north. Or if you pass away in the south, when the sun is in the south, or in the smoke in the night, or in the fortnight of the waning moon, then you only go to the moon planet, but you then come back. So basically, there's a lot of information there, but as you can see, it can be really complicated if you take the very regulated practical principles of Ashtanga Yoga, and you have to rely on all these different sort of regulations and circumstances. But on the other hand, if you're simply a devotee, if you're a bhakta, you're only relying on the mercy of the Lord rather than the position of the sun, the position of the moon, what day it is, what time it is, etc. It's much simpler for you to think about. You don't have to worry about those things anyway. And also the beauty of that is that the Lord might say, okay, I'll offer you this liberation, I'll offer you that liberation. Okay, maybe you died then, but I'll give you this anyway. And simply what you say is that you just want to be in his service. And so he's so overwhelmed. And then that way, like, you have such a powerful relationship with the Lord.
Nice. So
this chapter is extremely important because it's the most confidential knowledge, and it's actually contained right in the middle of the Gita. So Bhagavad Gita is 18 chapters, and this is the 9th chapter. And it's a very valuable thing. That's why it's protected right in the middle. So in this chapter, Krishna reveals the most confidential knowledge about himself to his devotees. And it's really important for us to understand that we can only really truly grasp this knowledge if we are unenvious and we have faith in the Lord. So this is why it was revealed to Arjun, because Arjun was his true friend. He was very faithful to him. If you know the story about when both Arjuna and Duryodhana approach Krishna and in the Mahabharata, and he says, look, one of you can have me and one of you can have my army. And Duryodhana's thinking, yeah, I'll take your army. I'm undefeatable. Your army's massive. The faith that Arjun has is that he knows that even Krishna is not fighting, just his counsel, just his presence is enough. So that's the sort of faith that we need to really understand this knowledge. And it kind of continues for us to know that believing in God, we shouldn't see it as naive. Like, if you think about the design of this world and how just magnificent it is, it seems very ludicrous to say, oh, there was an explosion and then suddenly everything was working very well. So certain aspects of the world lend it to the fact that having faith in God seems like to make more sense should sort of be solidified by this faith. So we learn a little bit more about the inconceivable nature of Krishna. And I just picked out 2 verses that really highlight how hard it is to understand his potency. So all beings are in me, but I am not in them. That seems somewhat paradoxical to us because we're on this material platform. It's very difficult for us to understand. And although I am everywhere, I am not part of the cosmic manifestation. He's within he's like here, but then also not above it as well. So it's very inconceivable for us to understand. And trying to explain this, sort of this verse 9.5, we have Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu culminated it in this sentence, Achintya Bede Bede Tattva, which means inconceivable oneness and difference. And ultimately, we'll never be able to understand how Krishna is able to be in all of us and in the trees and in our water, and then also, be in Golok Vrindavan with all the gopis having his eternal pastimes. That's something that we'll never really truly be able to link up, I don't think. And I think this is always another key lesson for me when I was going through this and revelation, was that we just cannot understand this through our own material logic, and it kind of re-emphasizes for me the importance of eventually getting guidance from a spiritual master, because they have a better understanding, they've seen that truth, and they're able to sort of translate these unconceivable verses into something a little bit more tangible for us to understand. And then finally, sort of talking about a little bit more about the beauty of Krishna's nature and how engaging in bhakti can be so valuable to us, and how Krishna is so loving when we do. So in 9.22 it says, those who worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. So first of all, Krishna clearly establishes himself as, we don't need to worship the devatas, we can just worship him, and he's the supreme enjoyer of those worship, of that devotion. But another thing that really struck me is this sentence, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. We all got weaknesses because we're on the material platform, but Krishna helps us become the very best version of ourselves. And this will take time, but the more that we practice, the more we will notice ourselves becoming kinder and nicer. I mean, we'll look a little bit more about the qualities that are endearing to Krishna, but we will cultivate those qualities just by starting this process. And then he also says, if one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, I will accept it. And this just shows how Krishna is most concerned with our love and our genuineness. He just simply wants us to worship him with our capacity. But rather that, if you offer him a leaf or you're overflowing with love, it's more valuable than, I don't know, offering a Ferrari. But it's like, yeah, you can just take it because I have like 10 other Ferraris.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So, and then in 9.30, this just highlights again sort of the merciful nature of like God, because even if one commits the most abominable action, he says, if he repents, if he engages in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. So, anybody can take to this practice at any point. Don't think, oh, I've been a really bad person, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. If you're sturdy in your determination and you're sturdy in your faith and you're really genuinely want to, try this practice in your life and become a good devotee, Krishna will accept that love because he ultimately wants us to come back. It won't let me go. Okay. Yep,
That's fine. Yeah.
So chapter 10. So I hope no one's getting too tired. We are almost there.
It's good. It's good. You explaining it very, very nicely.
Okay, that's good. In chapter 10, we learn a little bit more about the opulence of the Absolute. And this is because Arjuna is a very, very good friend of Krishna. We can have 5 rasas with Krishna, so it can be his friend, his lover, his servant. There are other ones, but they are not coming to mind at the moment.
Parent,
yeah.
And friend, servant, or neutral, and then lover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically Arjuna is in the friend rasa, and this personal relationship with the Lord means that, you know, he can find out a little bit more. Krishna is willing to explain his nature further, and he says, you know, he is unborn and beginningless, he is the source of all our qualities, and the sages came from his mind. So, you know, this there's some examples here. We're really lucky because we have the Bhagavad Gita, so even though it was revealed to Arjuna, we also get to gain this knowledge that Arjuna gets that personal relationship. And it just highlights that if we start this personal connection, if we become curious about this, you know, Krishna will fulfill our desire to understand more. So some examples of his opulence. Well, he says, of the letters I am A, of the poetry I am the Gayatri Mantra, and of the sages I am Vyasa. You know, just highlighting his power, his majesty, and, you know, his strength and wisdom. And it should be understood that, okay, he's not necessarily just but he's the source of that glory, the source of their wisdom. So Vyasa is a very, very knowledgeable sage and wrote the Mahabharata. That source of that wisdom comes from Krishna, is what he's trying to say here. And he also hints that actually all of this that we consider so majestic is just a fragment of his energy. So again, another sort of understanding how inconceivable these options are to us. Let's see if I covered everything. Yeah,
that's good.
So in chapter 11, this is like, can be a very scary chapter. We see Krishna's universal form. So Arjuna basically asks to see Krishna's universal form on our behalf, to set the standard of what we should see in basically in Avatar, if it comes down, or in God. Because in chapter 10, Arjuna already accepts Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is for our knowledge and our understanding. So we can see a picture of the universal form here. This might look quite terrifying, but this probably doesn't even cover what Arjuna actually saw. So Krishna basically fulfills Arjuna's desire, and he shows the universal form to Arjuna, and Arjuna becomes bewildered by this. He says, you know, Lord of Lords, so fierce a form, tell me who you are, because he sees that all of his relatives being crunched and eaten. He sees multiple heads. There's just so much, he doesn't even know where to pay his respects. He sees all of this creation happening at the same time. Like, imagine just all of the universe operating at the same time. I mean, it just becomes so overwhelming. So Krishna explains that, you know, he's a destroyer. He's time I am the destroyer. He's come to sort of kill the miscreants and protect his devotees. That's what's mentioned in the summaries earlier. He just says, Arjuna, I just need you to act as my instrument. You can be but an instrument in the fight. Therefore, you know, go now and fight. Do the work I need you to do. And Arjuna also asks for forgiveness after this, because they have often behave friendly with each other. As we see, you know, they have the personal relationship of friendship. And he's now so in awe of Krishna's powerful and fearful form that he asks for forgiveness, because he's so much struck by the superiority. But Krishna actually goes back to, you know, first he shows his four-handed form, and then eventually he goes to his two-handed form to, you know, allay Arjuna's dismay and the fact that he's so bewildered, and also to emphasize to him that this form is actually, you know, the most supreme form, the most beautiful form. It cannot be understood simply by studying the Vedas or undergoing serious penances, or by charity, nor by just, you know, reverent worship, or just looking at this big form and thinking, wow, it's very, very powerful. Actually, the devotion, the will to cultivate a personal relationship with the personality of Krishna is more valuable, which we'll kind of see a little bit more in the final chapter. And he just reassuringly says, my dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am. That's 1154. So finally, we're on devotional service, chapter 12. This is also a very important practical chapter for us to understand how we can start engaging on this path of Bhakti Yoga. So following from seeing the universal form, Arjuna wants to know basically definitely if he should worship the impersonal or the personal form of Krishna. Krishna makes it quite clear that it's quite a lot easier, and people are a lot dearer to him when they fix their mind on his personal form. So he says, those who fix their mind on my personal form and are always engaged in worshipping me with great and transcendental faith are considered to be most perfect. That's 12:2. So right at the beginning of the chapter, straight off, he says, this is what I think. Now, while he does say those who fully worship them unmanifest will at last achieve me, this is a really, really difficult process. I literally, there's that ellipsis there, there's like a bunch of conditions that you have to achieve to basically achieve Krishna through the worshipping the manifest. And he does go on to say this in the next few texts, saying that advancement is very troublesome because you don't have the same connection with a personality or like a friendship, whereas Arjuna had that reliance on Krishna because they had such a friendship and the various pastimes that they'd spent together. He trusted him completely as a result of that. And then Krishna now goes on to give various options as to how to reach the highest platform of devotional service. So Krishna doesn't make this path all or nothing. He's not going to say completely renounce yourself to me tomorrow. That would be very difficult for us because we've gone so far in the material world and we've forgotten so much about our original nature that we find it a little bit harder to first get on the path. We feel maybe a little bit intimidated by it. So the topmost stage is when we have our mind completely fixed on Krishna, but perhaps this can't be done yet for us. So then Krishna says, okay, if you can't completely do that, follow the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. Okay, but actually, or maybe that might be too much for you at this stage. Then just try and work for me. So like Arjun would be doing right now by becoming his instrument, just work for me, promote pious activities, do karma yoga and in devotion with me, like it mentioned in chapter 5, renounce the fruits of your work towards me. Or okay, if you can't do this yet, the material world is full of distractions, you might find that you can't entirely focus on working for me yet. Just renounce the fruits of your work, practice regulated spirituality, and begin sort of chanting and worshipping through your daily work. So things like the lessons we were talking about earlier with like drinking water and remembering Krishna and saying his name out loud, and also attending talks like this, gathering knowledge to strengthen our faith and to be more determined that this is the right sort of path that we want to go on.
It's good.
And finally, Krishna sort of closes the chapter by talking about the qualities that are very dear to him, and sort of split these into sort of different sections or groupings that go together. So first is the sort of being very what I'd sum up as like a good person, so being kind, not being envious, being humble, so not bragging and boasting about your achievements, finding satisfaction in the self, and being considerate towards other people, and then being pure and free from contamination, having expertise and being situated in knowledge. So that's coming back to, attending these seminars, reading the Gita, reading the scriptures, and from that first stage of devotional service, gathering that knowledge, becoming an expert, and that will help us in our faith. And then being equipoised in the face of material dualities. So for example, happiness and distress towards both our friends and our enemies, and in the face of success and failure, because these dualities are actually inevitable in the material world. And if anything, it will help us become detached. It also just help us be happier, because you might have one success there, probably failure is around the corner. You finish your A levels, then you go to your degree level, things are much harder, and you're going to find that you're finding things difficult when you used to think you were an expert in something, let's say. All these different things will be happening, and by being equipoised, the soul is so much more settled, and then also can then be focused on the real goal, sanatana dharma. And finally, and I think this links towards becoming tahir, being free from anxiety, lamentation, and independent of the ordinary courses of activity. So yeah, that is my summary of the chapter 6 to 12.
Excellent. Yeah, well done. That was very good. Good effort. Good effort. And well understood as well. Mom and Dad should be very proud of you. And I think your cousins are online as well. So
yes, they are. I think so.
I hope they appreciate. Yeah. Yes, very, very well presented.
Yeah, amazing.
She's a very gifted personality.
That's true. Very true. It was fantastically done.
She's only just begun. Only
Well,
just begun, because there's a lot more to learn, but also she's got the capacity to do it, and that's very inspiring to all of us, actually.
it is. It's a good teaching point for my kids, actually.
Yes.
They're 11 and 12, and it's fantastic,
Right.
you know, how it was presented and all that.
Right. Yes. That's a very good point, actually. 11 and 12. They're still quite young.
They are young, but you know, I just wanted them to listen to it. My daughter was listening to it, and
Yes.
there were questions when she was asking, I don't understand this really. What does this mean? You know.
Wow. That's
So
good.
I was trying to, you know, she's done the Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata, actually, in a religion class. So
I
she
see.
knows some of the, you know, the story and everything, outline and everything. But the questions that she was like, oh, I don't know what she means by this. What is this yogi thing and yoga thing? And so I said, okay, I'll explain you in a minute. Let's listen to Sanjana first completely, and then I'll explain to you a bit of whatever I know. You know, I'm not also completely, you know, I don't know every single thing, but you know, I got the gist of what was what she was talking about and everything.
Very good. It's amazing how it's usually the girls who tend to sit and listen and ask questions, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
We
You're
feel,
right. The boys are like, you know, oh gosh, there's too much of, we need visual, or we need, you know, practical things to understand.
Yeah. Well, we prefer Game Boy, yeah.
Yeah.
We do a children's sangha, and maybe your children should come to that.
What time is that?
That is UK time is 6 o'clock. But
okay.
I tell you what the beauty is. We have many 11-year-olds, and actually they're all girls who are the most attentive and ask the questions, funny enough. But the 11-year-olds are very, very good in terms of, Ritesh is on the line. Ritesh is the person who sort of coordinates them all. And they do interactive dramas, and this is on Zoom.
Okay.
But it's very powerful. In fact, if I get an opportunity, I'll send a link to Sanjana. She can forward it to you. Have a listen to the class this Saturday, today, and you will be absolutely amazed by the drama, but also by their questions.
Okay.
They had some amazing questions. And it may benefit your children to join that, because we go through different pastimes of Krishna, and then we give them the opportunity to ask questions.
Okay.
So, you know, this is the time when they, you know, usually, especially the girls, will have analyzed it and ask some good questions.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'll definitely. You said 6 p.m. UK time, yeah?
UK time. I'll send the recorded thing to Sanjana. She'll send it to you.
That would be fantastic, yeah.
And have a look at that. You will be, I think, amazed at the quality of the, not just the children, but the content. It's a really amazing content.
Yeah, definitely.
And you will find it help your children, because you get them at the right age. It's good, because later on you'll be crying. I wish I had told them earlier.
Yeah, that's true. That's why when my sister mentioned it, I said, yeah, I don't mind. And I think we did come for one of your session, actually, but I felt it was too much. There were more adults than any kids. Only Sanjana, I think, was there. So I think my daughter was listening it, but she was like, I'm not too sure if this is my class. So that's why I asked my sister. I said, do you have like a younger, you know, group, maybe, you know, for them to, you know, more understand it better, you know? Naturally, we adults tend to be more, you know, we will ask different questions and different ways of asking the questions. And so that's why, like, you know, I asked my sister, like, you know, just see if you have a kids session, like where, the kids can, maybe understand it better, and everything.
Yes.
So
I think we probably need to work on that. We have, to a degree, that children's sangha is what is probably more appropriate for her.
yeah.
So she can join that. But
Okay.
that's only once a week. But for you, if you have time to join at that time, it might be difficult because of the children. But I tell you why it's more beneficial for you. One, for your own satisfaction. But secondly, when the children ask, you will have the answers.
Correct. Yeah.
So if you do have the time, 4 o'clock UK time,
Okay.
you try to join it. But mind you, we've nearly finished the Bhagavad Gita now.
Okay.
But we will do other things because luckily we've got a very nice group of devotees who like to learn, and we like to also learn and teach at the same time. So
Yeah, that's fantastic.
no, thank you
Definitely.
for your feedback. Anybody got any comments, Karuna, about Sanjana?
Wonderful speaker, Prabhuji.
She is, but she
It's as
understands it
if
well.
everyone is
Yes,
distilling the Bhagavad Gita. You
yeah,
can use this word. It's
yeah,
really amazing.
it is amazing.
Everyone has done so nicely.
So well, yeah, yeah. And they've all understood. I'm particularly gratified with Sanjana because it's like coming quite new to the philosophy. But she's grasped it. She can explain it, that's fine. But she's actually
Yes,
understood it. That's
yes,
important. So,
yes, yes.
yeah. And Chitra was very good. So,
Chitra is still hesitating a lot to speak.
I didn't find that.
I told you,
I,
she's even more shy than I am.
but I didn't find that. I found her confident, and she answered the questions very well as well. So
Because I was guiding her. No, she knew the answer, but I was helping also.
yeah, of course. But this will
Yeah,
come
but
over time.
if she keeps in good association as it is now, I'm sure she'll get better and better.
For sure, definitely.
Yes, that's very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a very nice journey. All of these young fellows. Now, Kayan is next. The Kayan hasn't been able to join us so much in the Gita classes because he's got parents who need his support, which is wonderful for him to do that. Actually, it's very good when a young person sees the need of the elders and addresses that need. So that's a quality which I really admire. So I just got a question here. What do you mean by discrimination slide, Sanj? Not sure what you mean by that. Anu, do you, or Hina?
Hello. Hi.
Yes.
Hi. There was a slide where it had said discrimination. Now I've seen that terminology quite a bit, and it's got I think that's the Viveka or something like that, if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. I'm unsure about that. I'm not sure, lack of Viveka or Viveka. Is that right?
Actually, you're cutting out a bit. We can't hear your question completely.
Oh, okay. I'll try again.
Yeah.
I think Sanjana presented a slide about discrimination, and I think she's talking about the Viveka. Now, I'm not certain. I'm not clear on that point.
Sanjana, do you want to take on this?
Yeah, I'm trying to find which slide it is.
Yeah. Let's have a look at the slide.
Do you know what chapter it is?
No, it did say discrimination at the top, and then it was one of the. You have to go through the slide, and it says it at the top.
Okay, shall I share my screen again?
Okay.
Generally, when we talk about discrimination in the Bhagavad Gita, what Krishna basically says is the person who sees with real knowledge does not discriminate even between a sage, a dog eater, a dog, an elephant. That's text number 5, chapter 5, text 18. So Krishna is actually anti-discrimination.
Chapter 5, text 18. Right. Okay.
518, yeah. Have a
Yeah,
look at
I think that.
518.
Yeah.
Do you know which one it is on my slide?
No, keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
This is the mother
Keep going.
interrogating the daughter.
Keep going. More. Yeah, go. I'm sure it said it. You had this presentation about discrimination somewhere. Keep going.
I don't. This is the end.
Oh, okay. All right. I don't know. I should have pictured it. I should have pictured it. Okay, never mind. I've understood it. I've understood it, Nabi. It's clearer now.
Yeah. You two take it offline, and if there's any punch-ups, we don't want to know, okay?
No, I think you've explained it really well. I understood it now. Thank you. Okay.
But Hena Ben, I wanted to actually congratulate you and Anil for how you brought up this delightful young lady. So really,
I think her personality is really good. So we are really blessed with her personality, because I introduced her at a very young age when she was young, and then in the middle period didn't get the opportunity, and then now she's picked it up so well. I am really I'm really happy.
Yeah, you should be.
Yeah.
No, it's very good. Very nice. She's gonna save your whole family.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Mom will have a role in that as well. She's a good yogi.
Yeah, no, definitely good parents, good child.
Thank you.
So let's go to Kayan. You there, Kayan?
Yes, Hare Krishna, how are you?
Good, you? How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad.
So Kayan, I must introduce you, because you probably don't know, or many people don't know you probably. Kayan is a young lad. He actually was in China when all this, he was studying for a year when all this broke out. And luckily he's back in the UK, safe and sound. We've known him for about a couple of years, always found him to be a very amenable fellow, very nice, gentle guy. And it's a real pleasure for you to be part of this. I feel so happy. What do you fancy tackling, by the way?
As in, I don't mind going on from chapter 13 and up to 16. Is that okay?
Yeah, whatever you, anything you're comfortable with, huh?
Okay.
You can start. Yeah, you can start.
So I'll first start off with chapter 13. That's entitled Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. And it's a very nice chapter which deals with a question that Arjuna has about two specific topics, and that's Prakriti and Purush. And Krishna answers that the conditioned soul's body and the body's interactions within this mic realm, within this world, are his limited field of activities. And so first, let me premise off by giving a definition of those two terms, being that Prakriti and Purush. So Purush is all about the sort of the field of activities, and Prakriti is the knower of that field. And so one very nice revelation he makes in this chapter. So Krishna tells us that by understanding our true selves, by having self-realization, so understanding that there is this Mayic body, this material body that we have. We also have a soul, we have the Atma, and we also have a Paramatma, i.e. the super soul. And by making that distinction, understanding that these three entities are distinct, we can transcend this Mayic realm and fundamentally have, his sort of divine darshan in his abode. Which is very nice, but it comes down to this realization that we are the soul and not the body. Which is, of course, it's a very easy thing just to say, understanding ourselves to be the soul and not this body, but to put it into action is a lot more difficult. And it's also said that a lot of the suffering that we have, a lot of the troubles that we go through is from this lack of understanding that we have. We think ourselves to be the body, so when we have pain or when we have some sort of upadhi that comes in our life, some sort of how can I describe it? Some form of always use sort of pain or sort of misfortune. A lot of it is associated with the body, and so by understanding ourselves to be the Atma, understanding ourselves to be the soul, we can kind of disassociate ourselves from that particular misfortunate event. And so understanding that the living entity's entanglement within the material body is due to the association within the modes of material nature. And it's this modes of material nature that Krishna explains within the 14th chapter. And the 14th chapter is entitled The Three Modes of Material Nature. And within this chapter, we understand a lot of things. What are the three modes? What are the three gunas? How is one binded by these three guns? How can we be? How can we gain release from them? And so Krishna explains that there are three modes of material nature. There's the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance, i.e. Sattva gun, Rajagun, and Tamagun. And these forces, these modes of material nature, bind and essentially control all conditioned souls within this micron, within this world. And if we want to transcend these three modes of material nature, then we need to be doing activities. We need to be associating with things that are in the kind of tamasic realm, as in within the sattvic realm. And that stems a lot from who we associate with, the foods we eat, making sure we stay away from things that can lead to addiction, etc. So it's very nice. It's a very nice chapter. And so our aspiration essentially is to become gunatit. We aspire to become above these three guns. It's not just, we don't want to stay at this mode of goodness, but we want to get to the mode of pure goodness, as it were. And then in the 15th chapter, which is entitled the yoga of the Supreme Person, we essentially understand how we can, Krishna Bhagavan makes a very nice analogy of the upside down a banyan tree, and that is the sort of nature of Maya. So a banyan tree essentially it's a very big tree where it's very chaotic, very confusing, it has roots that come down. It's very entangling. I think that's the best word to describe it. And it's a nice way to describe Maya. And because it is Maya is very entangling. There's just, if we take our phones as a as a good example here, we have notifications, we have, it comes on and on, lights flashing. It is very entangling, time consuming, etc. And ultimately, if we want to get rid of this entanglement, if we want to essentially reside with Krishna in his eternal abode, we need to do that through surrenderance. And that is the only way. That is the only way by which a soul can transcend Maya and return to him in his spiritual abode. But he further explains that the foolish individual cannot understand that the soul transcends Maya. It doesn't understand that. They don't understand that we are this soul. We are not the body. And sorry, just looking at my notes here. And he also explains the nature of Paramatma, so what exactly it is, and the fact that the Paramatma resides within everyone's heart. It's the giver of knowledge, the giver of remembrance, the giver of forgiveness. And furthermore, Krishna also reveals that knowing him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and in particular engaging within his service, is the ultimate purpose that we have. So it's not just acknowledging Krishna Bhagavan to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but it's also to do things for him. It's to engage within Bhakti Yoga. As was said, prior, whether that was in the 11th or 12th chapter, I forget. Just offer me, a single leaf, and I will accept that. So it's all about bhakti. It's all about the bhav. It's all about the effort that we give it with. And then the 16th chapter is the divine and demonic natures. And the 16th chapter essentially explains what kind of mindset we should have. What kind of mindset naturally goes towards spiritual inquiry, and also explains what the opposite mindset is. So I guess for us as devotees, what kind of mindset we should try and stay away from, and what kind of mindset we should try and adopt. One that is more inclined towards spirituality. Which is a nice thing. And within this chapter, Krishna Bhagavan explains the 26 sort of, I would say, godly qualities, but also explains the kind of demonic natures as well, so things that we should try and get away from. Explains that because we have this material body, we also have certain swabhavas, certain sort of human conditions that are attributed towards this Maya form, be that of avarice, anger, ego, etc. However, by taking shelter of the Supreme Lord, by chanting, by engaging ourselves within service, by reading, we're essentially taking steps towards Him, and thus producing and kind of, I would say, it's sort of trying to have that spiritual mindset, which is very good. And furthermore, he makes the sort of distinction between the two mindsets. That as we chant, as we read more, we may still see ourselves still being slightly angry, or still having slight ego. But we shouldn't be, I guess, bewildered, or we shouldn't be put off by having these certain swabhavas. And by engaging within service, by chanting, by reading, ultimately these swabhavas will go away. And that is the end of my sort of short summary. Are there any sort of questions, comments, or contentions? I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability.
I can't hear anything. I think you might be on mute.
Oh no, I was basically just saying if anyone had any comments or questions or
Yeah.
contention.
No, I was on mute. No, I
Yeah,
think it was good. You
yeah.
summarized it well. Any Ritesh, anything you'd like to comment? He may not be there. Now, I feel quite gratified, I must admit, because we've had Kayan, Sanjana, Partha, Pitambar, and four. That's four, and Priti's not been able to make it because she was doing the children's sangha today. So I think it's been a good start. How do you feel, Sanjana, Kayan?
I think it's in itself it's a very nice task because you first have to read through all the different shlok in your own chapters, and you then have to try and understand. I would say, because a lot of the times I'll be reading the shloks and I'll be complacently reading them. I won't necessarily be understanding. Because each verse has a lot within it. And so not necessarily just trying to summarize, but also trying to kind of gain lessons is quite difficult, I find at times.
Yeah, definitely would agree. And I think also what was so valuable about this session was that everybody had such a different take on everything. Everyone had his own way of doing it, which I never thought about it that way, but I found it very interesting to see it in that angle. And everybody sort of presented the chapters in their own way. So I felt like I learned so much, not only from doing my own chapters, but from listening to everybody else as well.
Very, very good point. Yeah, you're right. Especially when you have a keenness to learn. That's really important. Yeah, I agree with you, Sanjana. Going forward, we nearly finished. Like, we've got one chapter left, which will take probably 2, maybe 3 sessions at the most. Then I wouldn't mind if because we've got 75 lessons from. Of course, not everybody's going to put all of them in place, but even if one lesson is sort of put in place, like I like the bit about what you mentioned about the water. That was good. So even if 1 or 2 lessons come out into somebody, at least we've had some impact of doing these courses, these seminars. So I was thinking maybe we'd go through these 75 lessons, at least as an overview, just to understand if people are actually finding them useful. I don't know. What do you think, Sanjana? How should we approach once we finish the Gita? We need to go over it a couple of times, I think.
Yeah, I think definitely maybe like take some of the key lessons, and then we could have like discussions maybe about how practical or whatever, how people have found it applying them in their lives, or any differences that they've noticed.
Okay, do it.
Sorry?
So yeah, I think, I mean, it's difficult to know how to begin it, but maybe start there.
And maybe we should again do a summary of the whole thing. once we finish the 18th chapter, just because what I don't want to do is, okay, we've done the Gita, let's move on to the next book, which we will do, but just want to reinforce what we've learned, I suppose, and just to get people thinking about, and also understanding the summary, understanding the context of the Gita, what was in the Gita, at least to a certain degree. So maybe a couple of summaries would be good, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. We'll put our heads together, and maybe I wouldn't mind even if you wanted to summarize the whole of the Gita in one session. That's quite an ask, but you're welcome to take on something like that. I'll be very happy for you to do that.
Yeah, I'm happy to try it. Definitely.
Yeah, that's good. I like your attitude. Yeah.
Like 1 week notice, and then I'll just get on it.
Yeah, probably next Friday, if you're up for it. We'll be there.
The 21st?
Yeah, let me just check. Yeah, 21st.
Okay, yeah, I will try and do it.
Yeah, that'll be good. Because by then we definitely have finished it, and maybe we even go through some of the lessons, and then a good wrap up would make sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. Okay. That's really, really good. Really good. Okay. So 17 and 18 chapters. 17th chapter is simply Krishna's going through very practical how we can give charity in the best possible way, how we can do our austerities in the best possible way. And he also talks about Om Tat Sat. And today we talked about the significance of the sound vibration Om, which is very interesting indeed. And then 18th chapter, Krishna describes a little bit more about how different things work in the different modes, about knowledge and other aspects, penances. But then he concludes the Gita very, very amazingly. How he says one can only know him by bhakti, and one who surrenders onto him is always protected by him. And then he talks about how one who gives this message to others is very dear to him. So I absolutely adore the later part of the 18th chapter, because it's so Krishna's just laying it out nicely, And he also says he repeats the verse twice in the Gita, and this is the second time he says, that person who always meditates on me and thinks about me, and he's the most dear to me. So that's a very, very pleasing verse to end the Gita with as well. So next week we'll spend a bit of time on that. And thank you. Gita, are you there?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. How did you find today's explanations of the Gita?
Yeah, they're really good. I thought Sanjana was really amazing. She explained it really clearly, especially considering that she's new to it as well. So I think she's sort of really picked it up really easily. And same with Kayan as well. Very good. Yeah, but I think you're right. It's always good to sort of rather than moving on quickly onto the Shri Bhagavatam, it's always good to summarize.
Yeah, we'll spend a few sessions summarizing, I think, or getting to the lessons. And yeah, you're right. And I'm thinking also you may want to also take part in doing a presentation. One chapter maybe, if you like. Because when you have to study and present it, it just means you have to understand it better. And that's always good.
Yeah, no, hopefully, Prabhu, hopefully very soon.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No rush, because always, as everything, this is voluntary, and if you want to do it. The opportunity is there.
Yeah.
So,
And
very good.
especially, I like chapter 17, my favorite, the one we did yesterday about the charity, and today's one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can talk about that sometime, happy for you to do that.
Okay.
Very nice. And we can think about the next time we want to do something like this, Sanjana and Kayan. We'll try to, I think we're all learning, and there is a gap in our audience that we haven't really captured the youth. We're doing something for the children, we're doing for adults, but we're not really doing anything for the youth. So, and I think because you are in that category, I'd love you to drive this, and we can try to attract some youth.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have a think.
Yeah, that's right. And the beauty is it's an open field, So there's nobody to tell you, hey, this is right or this is wrong. Your instinct may well be the right way to go. So thank you. So I don't know what Devotee's plans are. I am going to chant for some time. But of course, it's getting late. So if you want to depart and take rest, you're very welcome to. And I'd like to thank you very, very much for your participation. And, you really dived in. So Kayan and Sanjana, very, very good. Thank you.